It's 1936. An Austrian archaeologist named Wilhelm König is cataloging artifacts at a museum in Baghdad when he picks up a strange object, a clay pot about 5.5 inches tall. It's a simple, ordinary-looking pot, but on the inside, there's a hand-rolled copper cylinder, precisely soldered. Inside the cylinder, an iron rod suspended in the center, not touching the walls, and the top was sealed with bituminous asphalt. König looks at it and knows immediately. This is not a storage jar. This is not a ritual object. It's a battery, and it was made 2,000 years before Alessandro Volta invented the first battery in official history. Welcome, explorer. Today we're going to uncover together 6 inventions that once existed, worked, and vanished from history. 6 ancient inventions forgotten by history. These inventions are not legends. They are documented, studied, and frequently overlooked facts. Come along with me, I'm Curious Chris, and I'll be your guide on this journey through the past. The Baghdad Battery. The pots came from excavations in Kujat Rabu, near Baghdad, dated between 200 BC and 224 AD, the Parthian period. When modern researchers built exact replicas using period-accurate materials, clay, copper, iron, and vinegar as the electrolyte, the result was immediate: 1.1 volts of steady electric current. In 2005, the Mythbusters connected 10 pots in series and generated 4 volts. In 1978, researcher Arne Eggebrecht did something even more unsettling. He electroplated a silver statuette with gold using nothing but a replica pot and vinegar. The process worked, and that's when the question nobody can satisfactorily answer comes up. If this was just a storage jar, why would anyone go through the trouble of building a precisely soldered copper cylinder with an iron rod in the center, sized exactly so it wouldn't touch the walls? The official explanation is a comfortable one. Archaeologists say the pots were used to store sacred scrolls. The copper protected the papyrus. The rod held the roll in place. The asphalt sealed out moisture. The battery effect would be pure coincidence, an accidental result of combining different metals in an acidic environment. But this explanation has a serious problem. No one has ever found a single scroll inside any of these pots. Not a fragment. Not a single compatible organic residue. And if they were meant to store sacred documents, why use copper, an expensive, labor-intensive material, instead of simple clay or wood? The internal construction is far too specific to be accidental. Each element, the cylinder, the rod, the seal, serves exactly the function it would serve in an intentional battery. There's something even more unsettling about this story. Egyptian reliefs at the Temple of Dendera, dated to 50 BC, show what many researchers interpret as figures inside glass bulbs, connected by braided cables, in positions that resemble electrical filaments. Greek and Roman physicians already used electric shocks from eels and torpedo fish to treat pain, documented by Pliny and Galen. If the peoples of Mesopotamia developed galvanic cells, and if Mediterranean craftsmen used animal electricity for medicine, then we're not looking at an isolated accident, but at a technological tradition that was completely erased. It didn't evolve. It wasn't replaced. It simply vanished, leaving behind no texts, no schools, no heirs. The original Baghdad pots were looted during the Iraq War in 2003. Most were never recovered. Only a handful of specimens remain in museums in Germany and Baghdad. The most important physical evidence of this discovery is now scattered or destroyed. And here's the detail that's most troubling. If the Baghdad Battery was truly intentional, it means that someone, 2 millennia ago, understood electrochemistry well enough to create a functioning device. And that knowledge was so thoroughly lost that it disappeared without a trace. No school, no treatise, no followers. How does a technology that actually works simply cease to exist? That is exactly the same question a man in New York would ask 1,900 years later, when he watched his greatest invention get demolished and sold for scrap by those who had the most to lose from his success. Tesla's Wardenclyffe Tower. It's 1901. You're standing on Long Island, New York, watching a 187-foot tower being raised in the middle of nowhere. At the top, a metal dome the size of a house. Below, tunnels boring into the earth like the roots of a sleeping giant. The man who designed it says that once it's finished, anyone on the planet will have free electricity. No wires, no power bills, no middlemen. That man is Nikola Tesla. And what he's building is not a tower. It's a declaration of war against the most profitable system in the world. A declaration that the most powerful men in America will silence before it ever comes close to being heard. Tesla was not a garage eccentric. He was the man who invented alternating current, the same system that powers every outlet in the world to this day. In 1899 in Colorado Springs, he did something no physics textbook of the time could explain. He lit up 200 light bulbs with no wires from more than 25 miles away, using the Earth itself as a conductor. Recorded in his journals, photographed, witnessed. He wasn't theorizing, he was demonstrating. And when he brought that proof to J.P. Morgan, the richest man in America, Morgan signed the check on the spot. $150,000, the equivalent of $5 million today. Construction on the tower began, and for one brief moment, the future seemed inevitable. Then something changed. In 1903, Marconi transmitted radio signals across the Atlantic. Morgan saw in that something Tesla's tower could never offer. Control. Radio you can charge for. Free wireless energy distributed to the entire world has no meter, no invoice, no profit. Morgan cut the funding. No negotiation, no public explanation. He simply cut it. Tesla spent years trying to find other investors. Nobody wanted to touch the project. In 1917, the U.S. government ordered the tower demolished, citing the risk of German espionage during World War I. The metal was sold for scrap for just $1,750. The greatest idea of the century was literally taken apart, weighed and sold by the pound. But the questions left behind can't be measured on any scale. If wireless energy transmission was physically impossible, how did Tesla light 200 bulbs from 25 miles away with no wires in 1899? Why did the FBI seize all of his documents immediately after his death in 1943, with some files still classified to this day? Physicists like James Coram and Constantine Mail argue that Tesla wasn't working with conventional electromagnetic waves, but with longitudinal waves through the Earth's crust, a completely different mechanism that doesn't follow the same limitations as classical physics. If they're right, the main scientific argument against the tower collapses, and then the story stops being about a failed inventor and starts being about a technology suppressed by those who had the most to lose from it. Tesla died in 1943, alone in a New York hotel room, penniless and unrecognized, while the entire world was using his invention of alternating current to enrich the very people who had destroyed his greatest dream. Today, wireless chargers, microwave energy transmission, and experiments with space-based lasers are proving, step by step, that Tesla's core idea was not madness. It was an inconvenience. An inconvenience for monopolies that needed wires to charge, meters to bill, and dependency to survive. The question that remains is not whether the tower would have worked. It's how many other technologies were buried for the same reason, not because they failed, but because they worked too well for those who controlled the money. And speaking of something that worked so well it was completely erased, there's a plant that for 700 years was the most powerful medical technology in the ancient world. And that vanished so completely that today we don't even know for certain what plant it actually was. Silphium. Imagine a plant so valuable it was engraved on the gold coins of one of the richest cities in the ancient world. So powerful that Roman emperors received it as a state gift. So effective that Greek physicians prescribed it for pain, inflammation, and digestive problems, and above all, for something no other plant in the world could do with the same efficiency: prevent pregnancy. Its name was Silphium. For 700 years, it grew wild in a narrow 30-mile stretch along the North African coast, in the region that is today Libya. It could not be cultivated anywhere else on the planet. And around 100 AD, it simply disappeared. It wasn't a war. It wasn't a plague. It was us. We harvested it down to the last plant and never saw another one again. The city of Cyrene built its entire wealth on silphium. It exported to Greece, Rome, and Egypt. Pliny the Elder wrote that a single stalk of the plant was worth its weight in silver. Cyrenian coins bore the image of the plant as a national symbol, and many historians believe that the heart shape we use today to represent love derives from the shape of the silphium seed. The gynecologist Soranus of Ephesus, in the 2nd century, described its contraceptive use with striking precision. A dose the size of a chickpea, taken once a month, prevented pregnancy with nearly 100% effectiveness. For comparison, the modern birth control pill, when used correctly, has a 91% effectiveness rate with typical use. A 2,000-year-old plant was more effective than 20th-century pharmaceutical technology. The official explanation for its disappearance is simple and brutal: overexploitation. Silphium could not be farmed. It only grew wild, and the demand from the Mediterranean world was infinitely greater than nature could replenish. Sheep grazing, which Pliny explicitly mentions, accelerated the destruction of its habitat. In less than a century, it went from scarce to non-existent. The last documented stalk was sent as a curiosity to Emperor Nero around the year 54 AD. After that, absolute silence. But the official explanation doesn't answer every question. If the plant was so valuable, why didn't the Cyrenians create protected reserves? Why did no botanist of the time prioritize its preservation or cultivation? And why, 2,000 years later, with all of modern genetic and botanical technology, have we still not been able to identify with certainty what plant it actually was? Some researchers refuse to accept that silphium simply vanished. In 2021, Turkish botanist Mahmut Miski published a study proposing that Ferula drudiana, a rare plant still found in parts of Turkey, may be silphium or a direct relative. The morphology matches ancient descriptions. The habitat is compatible, and preliminary chemical analyses show compounds with anti-inflammatory and possibly hormonal potential. If Miski is right, silphium is not extinct. It's hiding, with no one having bothered to look for it properly. Which raises an uncomfortable question. In an era where the pharmaceutical industry moves trillions of dollars on contraceptives, who benefits from the fact that no one is seriously investigating a plant that could make those medications obsolete? There is also a darker theory that some historians don't dismiss. Silphium began to grow scarce at precisely the same period that Christianity was consolidating its hold over the Roman Empire. A doctrine that from the very beginning condemned birth control, the complete extinction of the ancient world's most effective plant for that purpose, at the exact moment a new moral and political force was taking control of the Mediterranean may be a coincidence, or it may not be. There is no proof of deliberate suppression, but the absence of any effort to preserve something so valuable is, in itself, a way of letting something die. Silphium leaves us with a cruel lesson. Sometimes the most powerful technology is not destroyed by enemies. It is abandoned by those who should have protected it. And speaking of something abandoned that resisted the test of time in ways science still can't fully explain, there is a color created by a civilization on the other side of the Atlantic, one that survived acids, solvents, and centuries of sunlight, and that the modern world only began to understand in 2008. Maya Blue. Think of the most durable color you can imagine. Now, pour sulfuric acid on it. Submerge it in industrial solvent. Let 600 years of sun, rain, and tropical humidity work against it. With any modern pigment, the result would be a faded stain, a shadow of what it once was. But on the wall of a Maya temple in Mexico, that color is still there, vivid, intense, exactly as it was when it was applied, more than 6 centuries ago. This pigment is called Maya Blue, and it shouldn't exist. Not with that level of durability, not with that technology. Because what the Maya created was not simply a paint, it was a fusion of organic and mineral matter that Western science would have classified as impossible until the 21st century. And that only began to be partially understood in 2008. Maya Blue appears in murals, ceramics, and codices produced between the 9th and 16th centuries throughout Mesoamerica. The color is unmistakable, a deep turquoise blue with a slight green undertone, vibrant even on surfaces exposed to centuries of weathering. 20th century researchers spent decades trying to understand why this pigment didn't degrade like all the others. Tests with hydrochloric acid, nitric acid, organic solvents, and even forced oxidation couldn't destroy it. In 1960, chemist Domingo Domenech identified the 2 main ingredients: indigo, the dye extracted from the annual plant, and palygorskite, a rare mineral clay. But mixing the 2 in the right proportion didn't reproduce the result. Something was missing. A step, a secret. And that secret stayed hidden for 4 more decades. It wasn't until 2008 that researchers at Mexico's National Polytechnic Institute discovered the missing element: heat. The Maya didn't simply mix indigo with clay. They heated the mixture at specific temperatures, causing the organic molecules of the indigo to literally penetrate the crystalline structure of the mineral clay, creating a fusion at the molecular level. The result was a hybrid material, neither purely organic nor purely mineral, with properties that neither component possessed on its own. It was nanotechnology before the concept existed, and even after this discovery, the exact formula, the precise temperature, the heating time, the ideal ratio, has still not been fully reproduced, with results matching the original Maya samples. We know what they did. We still don't know exactly how. What makes this story even more unsettling is the context in which the pigment was used. Historical records and archaeological analyses indicate that Maya Blue was applied to sacrificial victims before rituals. The temple walls, where it appears most frequently, are precisely the offering chambers. This means the most advanced pigmentation technology the Maya ever developed, resistant to any natural or chemical force the modern world can throw at it, was created not to decorate palaces or record history, but to mark the moment between life and death. And when Spanish conquistadors arrived in the 16th century, they systematically destroyed Maya records. They burned codices, demolished temples, and the knowledge of how to produce Maya Blue vanished along with everything else. leaving behind only the pigment itself, silently holding on in walls that outlasted the conquest that killed its creators. Today, art conservation laboratories around the world study Maya blue, trying to learn from it. Because pigment degradation is a critical problem for museums, the textile industry, and construction. A pigment that lasts centuries without breaking down would be worth billions, and the answer may be sitting on the wall of a destroyed temple in Mexico, created by a civilization that Western history chose to erase rather than learn from. The question that remains is simple and uncomfortable. If the Maya solved a problem that modern science still hasn't fully solved, what else did they know that never reached us? And speaking of something that traveled through time in a way that defies all explanation, there is a piece of glass found in the Sahara Desert that once adorned a pharaoh's breastplate, formed by an energy event so violent that science still debates what could have caused it. Libyan Desert Glass. In 1922, when Howard Carter opened Tutankhamun's tomb in the Valley of the Kings, the world stopped. Gold everywhere. Statues, amulets, jewel-covered thrones. But among all those treasures, there was one object that would go ununderstood for decades. At the center of the pharaoh's personal breastplate, the jewel closest to his heart, was a yellow-green stone carved in the shape of a scarab. For years, it was classified as chalcedony, a common mineral. Then, in 1998, Italian geologist Vincenzo de Michele analyzed the stone with modern equipment and discovered something that changed everything. It was not chalcedony. It was glass. Pure glass, with 98% silica content, purer than any glass the Egyptians were capable of producing at the time. And it had been formed in the Sahara Desert 28 million years before any human being existed on Earth. Libyan desert glass is found across an area of roughly 2,500 square miles in the Sahara, along the border between Egypt and Libya. The fragments are yellowish and translucent, scattered across the sand, some weighing up to 57 pounds. The chemical composition is extraordinary. 98% pure silicon dioxide, the result of desert sand melted at temperatures exceeding 3,200 degrees Fahrenheit. For reference, a lightning bolt, already one of the hottest phenomena in nature, reaches at most 54,000 degrees, but only for a fraction of a second in a minuscule area. To melt 2,500 square miles of sand at 3,200 degrees, you would need something on a completely different scale. And that is precisely where scientists get stuck. There are three main theories, and none of them fully holds up. The first says a meteor exploded in the atmosphere before reaching the ground. An airburst, like the Tunguska event in 1908, releasing energy equivalent to hundreds of nuclear bombs and melting the sand below. The second proposes a direct comet impact, whose icy and rocky nucleus would have vaporized instantly upon contact with the Sahara's dry atmosphere. The third, more controversial, suggests that the distribution pattern of the glass and the uniformity of the melting are not consistent with either of those events, raising the possibility of a mechanism not yet catalogued by modern science. In 2013, a team led by geologist Jan Kramers found at the center of the area a rock fragment with a chemical composition matching no known terrestrial rock named Hypatia, suggesting an interstellar origin. The event that created Libyan desert glass may have been more complex and more violent than any current model can explain. But what is truly unsettling is not the origin of the glass. It's what the Egyptians did with it. Tutankhamun lived around 1332 BC. The glass he wore was 28 million years old. That means someone, at some point before Tutankhamun's reign, walked through the Sahara Desert, found those translucent, gleaming fragments scattered across the sand, recognized something special in them, and brought them back. Not as a curiosity, as treasure. The scarab carved into the pharaoh's breastplate shows refined craftsmanship, with details that required precise tools and technical knowledge to work a material harder than quartz. The Egyptians didn't know that glass had been formed by a cosmic catastrophe, but they knew it was unlike anything else, and they placed it in the most sacred spot they had, over the heart of the king. Today, fragments of Libyan desert glass are collected by researchers, museums, and collectors around the world. The area where it occurs is a remote and protected desert region, but unregulated collection has already significantly reduced the supply available for scientific study. And the central mystery remains unanswered. What, exactly, 28 million years ago, released enough energy to melt thousands of square miles of sand in a single event? Science has hypotheses. It doesn't have certainty. And perhaps it is poetic that the object closest to the heart of a pharaoh, son of the sun, was created by an event so powerful that to this day no human being can fully explain where that power came from. And speaking of transformative power that official history preferred to ignore, there is a civilization on the other side of the Atlantic that mastered a complex chemical process 3,000 years before Western science even imagined it was possible, and lost that knowledge not to time, but to conquest. Aztec Rubber. It's 1839. An American named Charles Goodyear accidentally heats a mixture of rubber and sulfur on a stove and discovers something that will change the industrial world: vulcanization. Rubber that doesn't melt in the heat, doesn't crack in the cold, durable, elastic, and resilient. The world celebrates as if it were the first time anyone had ever done this. But it wasn't. 3,000 years earlier, in the forests of Mesoamerica, civilizations like the Olmecs, the Maya, and the Aztecs had already mastered this process with a precision Goodyear never fully achieved. They manufactured balls that bounced with a force impossible for the era, waterproofing materials, footwear, and equipment with properties that Western science wouldn't catalog until the 19th century. And when the Spanish conquistadors arrived, they took the gold, the silver, and the land. What they didn't take, they destroyed. And the exact process by which those civilizations transformed raw latex into vulcanized material was one of the first casualties of that destruction. The first Spaniards to arrive in Central America were stopped in their tracks by something they had never seen: black rubber balls, the size of a human head, bouncing on stone courts with an energy that seemed supernatural. The Mesoamerican ball game, played for at least 3,500 years, used balls made from the latex of the rubber tree, Hevea brasiliensis, mixed with the juice of a vine called Ipomoea alba, the same family as the sweet potato. MIT researchers, in a study published in 1999, found that this specific mixture, latex with Ipomoea alba, when processed at the correct temperatures and ratios, produces rubber with mechanical properties superior to those of modern sulfur vulcanization, more elastic, more impact-resistant, and produced without any industrial process, using nothing but plants and knowledge. The official explanation for the loss of this knowledge is straightforward: conquest. The Spanish systematically destroyed Mesoamerican culture. They burned entire libraries of codices, banned rituals, killed spiritual leaders and craftsmen. The ball game was prohibited because the conquistadors associated it with pagan rituals and human sacrifice. And when the game ended, the need to produce those specific balls ended with it. The knowledge was passed down orally, from master to apprentice, within specific communities. When those communities were destroyed or forced to abandon their practices, the process went with them, not gradually, from one generation to the next. But here is what the official explanation doesn't answer. Why, in the 300 years following the conquest, did no European systematically attempt to document and preserve this process before it disappeared completely? Because the answer to that question reveals something uncomfortable. Europeans didn't recognize the value of what they were seeing. Rubber balls were exotic curiosities, not serious technology. The colonial mindset was clear. If it wasn't invented in Europe, it wasn't civilized enough to be preserved. When Goodyear discovered vulcanization in 1839, the Western world needed another 60 years to develop the rubber industry on a global scale. An industry that, ironically, devastated the Amazon and enslaved indigenous populations to extract the very latex that those same civilizations had mastered millennia before. And what's most disturbing is that the 1999 MIT study showed that Mesoamerican rubber was not merely equivalent to the modern version. It was superior in specific characteristics. Which means that by destroying this knowledge, the world didn't lose a primitive curiosity. It lost an advanced technology that has not yet been fully recovered. Today, materials researchers at American and European universities are studying the combination of latex and Ipomoea alba, trying to replicate the original properties. The results are promising, but incomplete, because the Mesoamerican process involved variables that have not yet been fully mapped. The exact ratio, the temperature, the processing time, and possibly other ingredients that didn't survive in the fragmented historical records left behind after the conquest. We find ourselves, once again, trying to reconstruct with modern science something that human hands did with perfection 3,000 years ago. And that brings us back to the central question running through each of the ancient inventions and technologies we've explored today. It is not a question about the past. It is a question about the present. How much of the human knowledge that exists today is being suppressed, ignored, or destroyed for exactly the same reasons: power, profit, and fear of what cannot be controlled? 6 technologies. 6 different inventions. 6 stories with the same pattern. Something worked, something threatened an established order, and something disappeared. The official explanation is always a comfortable one. Resources depleted. Knowledge lost over time. Inevitable conquests. But when you line up these 6 cases side by side, the comfort disappears. Because the most disturbing coincidence is not that these technologies existed. It's that all of them, without exception, vanished at exactly the moment they most threatened those in power. History is not just a record of what happened, it's a record of what the victors decided to leave behind. Now, I want to hear from you. Which of these 6 topics surprised you the most? Leave a comment telling me which one caught you most off guard. And if you already knew any of them before this video, tell me that too. And if this video made you question what else official history has left out, just imagine what the next ones will bring. So here's what I need you to do. Hit that like button right now, because it tells the algorithm that this content deserves to reach more people. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't yet, and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss a single exploration. This channel exists for people exactly like you. Explorers, curious minds, people who aren't satisfied with the ready-made versions of our history. Thank you for embarking on this journey today. If you made it this far, comment Campfire to show that you were part of this journey. I'm Curious Chris, and I'll be waiting for you on the next adventure. Until the next exploration.